Customs procedures, often used with imports. And we're on the Taxation and Customs Union website of the EU. We previously looked at free circulation, temporary storage, and inward processing. So next, specific use. Even without a trade agreement, specific use allows certain types of goods movements to qualify for zero or reduced rates of customs charges, as long as certain criteria are met. There are two broad categories of goods movements that are catered for using two separate specific use procedures. One is called temporary admission. The other, end use. And we'll discuss temporary admission next, but first. For beginners like me, it can be easy to confuse procedures with similar names. Procedures such as temporary admission and temporary storage. But these are different customs procedures. Commonly, temporary storage is used by importers based within the customs territory, whilst applicants for temporary admission are established outside of the customs territory. Unsurprisingly, we'll see exceptions exist. So what is temporary admission? The temporary admission procedure allows goods and items to be brought into the trading area on a temporary basis before being moved out again. And temporary admission goods need to be clearly identified as such in order to qualify for a total or partial relief from import duty. Any other customs requirements, which may also include guarantees for debt arising, need to be met, of course, prior to import. It's worth noting that temporary admission is totally different from the inward processing procedure. What does that mean? Well, with temporary admission, after import, there should be no intention to alter or process the imported goods for the purposes of later resale. If the goods are not to be altered, processed, and later resold, why would they be imported in the first place? Reasons are many. Beg pardon. Common examples you might find in literature are goods being imported for exhibit, perhaps at a trade fair, such as carpet and furniture samples perhaps, or professional equipment, guitars, drums and such, being moved for a band, performing one or more gigs. Also computers and projectors, being transported to venues, hosting online conferences, etc. We see here that, in some cases, the completion of customs formalities is not required, for example temporary admission of means of transport. What does this mean? As long as the vehicle used to transport goods is not for sale, it can also be covered by the temporary admission procedure, as can any spare parts for the vehicle, if these are brought along at the same time as the goods. If the vehicle spares are brought separately, then a separate application will be needed for these. All this, as long as there is no intention to sell the vehicle. Customs also offer something called a temporary admission carnet. We discuss this in later videos. For now, reviewing conditions for the EU. What are these? No alteration of the goods is intended, other than changes brought about by normal depreciation due to the use made of them. So I guess repairs of normal wear and tear, and accidental damage repair are okay. Also, the goods can be clearly identified, unless abuses are unlikely, given the nature of the goods, or the intended use. Okay. And the holder of the procedure is established outside the customs territory of the Union, except where otherwise provided. For instance, natural persons, who have their habitual residence in the customs territory of the Union, and work for an employer, who is established outside the territory, can benefit from total relief from import duty, in respect of means of transport used by them, as owner or as renter, for commercial or private purposes. Lastly, the overall customs requirements must be met, such as a guarantee, provided where required. Next, a quick look at conditions for the temporary admission of goods into the UK. The EU and UK versions of TA have much in common. But for the UK, let's augment this EU info with a few conditions set by HMRC. So, over to Notice. Annex C, Temporary Admission, End-Use Relief. Many of these points are also on the EU page. Pause if you like. But I specifically want to point out equivalence here. We previously discovered the equivalence procedure when we looked at inward processing. But you cannot actually process goods with TA. So what is going on here? Good question. At the top, and TA is for non-UK or non-EU goods that are intended for re-export after a specific use. And a quick jaunt to the bottom of this page. We see equivalence can modify TA by allowing you to use identical free circulation goods in place of the goods you are authorized to enter to TA, but the other rules for TA still apply, in that the replacement TA goods are not intended to undergo any change, etc., etc. Furthermore, equivalent goods shall have the same CN code, or commodity code if you prefer, the same commercial quality and technical characteristics as the goods they are replacing, and you need to indicate use of equivalence, the CN code, and provide a full description of your equivalent goods. All this in your prior TA application, I guess. Back to the top. And we see TA procedure may only be used with equivalence, where the conditions relating to equivalence can be verified. 1.2. The period that goods can remain under TA. In brief, The purpose for which TA goods are to be used, and that they remain unaltered, are key points. But so is the period of time that your goods can stay in the territory. And customs have final say over how long your goods can remain in their territory. The max time limit given is 24 months. And TA goods have to be either re-exported or released to free circulation after this period. You can even apply for your first temporary admissions procedure, and then set a different customs procedure a while after, followed by a second temporary admission procedure after that. However, the period specified for both temporary admission procedures still cannot exceed 24 months. We also see, in this case, that the intermediary procedure is also a special procedure. And we saw a list of special procedures earlier. Here we see, CW stands for Customs Warehousing. In this case, goods are imported and used under a temporary admission authorization, then put into customs warehousing, and then used again under a second TA authorization. In all cases, you should re-export your goods, or apply for union status for them, as soon as the use, for which they were admitted to TA, has finished, and not simply 24 months from the date of import. But customs provide assistance for special cases. And we see. The holder of the authorization can apply for an extension to the approved period, in exceptional circumstances. But the overall period of TA cannot exceed 10 years. And that's nice. 1.3 Partial relief. Under TA, if you didn't meet the qualifications for total relief, you still might qualify for partial relief. And we see conditions for partial relief here. You can get partial relief for your TA items, provided your goods are still intended for re-export outside the UK and EU, and will not be altered or changed, except for routine maintenance necessary to preserve them in the same condition they were imported. But also, provided your TA goods are neither consumable goods nor liable just for import VAT. What is the amount payable for partial relief? 3% of the free circulation charge, i.e., 3% of the cost of releasing the goods to free circulation, per month. Well, for every month, or part month, that your TA items remain in the territory. And although this cumulative sum cannot exceed the overall free circulation charge, it is payable when the procedure has been discharged. How's that? Great. So, at any point, when applying for either full or partial relief, there may be more specific conditions for your particular situation, and we'll show the HMRC Imports and Exports General Enquiries later, just in case you need it. And they will help you. Just below that, we see general conditions for partial relief. For now, under TA, we see the same conditions for partial relief as for full relief, which we saw earlier in this video. But, with one exception. Here, there is no mention of free circulation. Previously, for full TA relief, we saw that goods should be either re-exported or released to free circulation. Here, we only see mention that, for partial relief, your TA items should be intended just for re-export outside the UK and EU. I'll just highlight these, and you can pause if you wish, but not to dwell. I'll move on. 1.4. General conditions. Unless otherwise provided for. Contact HMRC about your situation. So, unless otherwise provided for, goods placed under the TA procedure must not be altered or changed, except through normal depreciation, due to the use made of them. Repairs and maintenance, due to normal wear and tear, are also admissible. We see. Repairs and maintenance, including overhaul and adjustments, or measures to preserve the goods, or to ensure their compliance with any technical requirements, for their use under the procedure, shall be admissible. 1.5. Place to submit an application. You can submit a declaration to customs, for the area where your goods will be used. If your goods arrive at a customs territory, where they are not scheduled to be used, they should travel, under transit, to the area, where they will be used. And we cover transit procedures, in later videos. You can appear in person, at the customs office, to present your TA wares and item. In this case, you have two options. Either make an oral declaration, or present a temporary admission conne, one of these, to customs. Followed by Section 2. Means of transport, abbreviated to MOT, including help with pallets and containers, including their accessories and equipment. We'll take a very quick skim. Scrolling down. And stopping briefly at 2.6 Conditions for granting total relief from import duty for means of road, rail, air, sea and inland waterway transport. Types of transport, allowed under TA relief. Various road vehicles. Civil air transport. Sea-going vessels. Included other, normal spare parts, accessories and equipment imported with the above. Other than moving your TA goods, you might wish to use your means of transport, for other purposes. We see a list here of such purposes, that are not covered by the means of transport provisions, under the TA relief procedure. You can't get TA customs reductions on your means of transport, if you are also using the transport for sports, radio, television production or broadcasting, humanitarian purposes, mobile inspection units, traveling workshops /laboratories. Using your means of transport for test or demonstration is not covered. Sale of your means of transport is not covered. Neither is use for exhibition. You should consult HMRC or the relevant section in this manual if your transport also falls into any of these uses. So, there is plenty more here, should you wish to follow up. But we'll round off TA with a jump to HMRC imports and exports general inquiries. Fab.